In this module, we'll talk about the factors which might impede the growth of English in the world. There have been lots of movements in the countries which have a large number of immigrants, where the immigrant population wants to preserve their own language, and they want to preserve their own cultural identity through their language. Whenever there's a situation where people who speak different languages come together, there is a conflict between intelligibility and identity. So many people to coexist together, they need to understand each other. But at the same time, these people do not want to learn each other's language, or do not want to sacrifice their identity or lose their identity only for the sake of better communication. So this pull between intelligibility and identity results in a conflict, and has resulted in a conflict in many parts of the world in the past as well. So we have this official English movement in the USA these days, where there is a large number of immigrants from different parts of the world, and this number is continuously increasing. Whenever there are movements for the preservation of threatened languages, there are always concerns by the dominating languages as well. So in the past, there have been language movements in Wales, Ireland, Hawaii, Quebec, New Zealand, etc., with varying degrees of success, and many of these language movements have succeeded in restoring their languages. So whenever there's this conflict between intelligibility and identity, or wherever whenever different languages coexist, there are different kinds of reactions and responses from speakers of both threatened languages and dominating languages. For example, in the past, in different parts of the British Isles, when the British became the dominating language, and there were language movements which demanded for the restoration of their own languages, the English speakers needed a guarantee that nothing will happen to the status of English. And whenever a similar situation arises where our dominating language is made to give some allowance to the other languages, the other languages which are not as powerful as the dominating language, the powerful language wants to first make sure that its own role and status will not be harmed in any way. A similar situation is witnessed in America these days, where the English speakers feel a little bit threatened by the presence of the speakers of other languages in the USA, especially Spanish. The number of Spanish speakers is gradually increasing in America. So a long debate took place in America, and there were arguments both for the official English movement and against the official English movement. Many bills were presented before the Parliament. Finally, the Emerson English Language Empowerment Act was presented before the Senate, and the major, let's say, the major suggestions of this bill, the suggestions made by this bill in favor of a common language included the fact that the preservation of unity and diversity is possible only when there's a common language. So the bill did not deny diversity, but it also, in a way, supported the idea of unity, and unity was possible only when there was a common language. It also recommended that the presence of a common language, the use of a common language, that is English, will prevent divisions along linguistic lines. For example, if different people in a country are using different languages, it is likely to create division among the speakers of those languages. It was also recommended through this bill that use of English will empower the immigrants. It will their knowledge of English language and their skill in English language will open better opportunities for them, and it will empower them. And knowing the language of the host country is also good in the sense that it makes it easier for the immigrants to assimilate with the local population, and only after being completely assimilated with the local population can they make full advantage of the economic and occupational opportunities available in the country. So all these points were presented in favor of the use of a common language, that is English. But languages other than English were also allowed, considering the fact that there were as many million immigrants in the country, and all of them could not gain or obtain complete mastery of English quickly. The use of local languages were allowed in different domains, for example, public health and safety services, where language could create critical situation, or not knowing a particular language could create critical and life-threatening situations, for example, public health and safety. Teaching of foreign languages has also been introduced in the USA. There was a time when it was felt that the native English speaking countries are not interested in learning any foreign languages, and they are quite complacent with the fact that they own English and they have full command of the English language. But now teaching of foreign languages has been introduced in many native English speaking countries. It is also introduced the use of languages, different languages is also allowed in domains where international relations and trade are facilitated with the use of foreign languages, languages other than English. So in this domain as well, a language other than English is allowed. The languages of the immigrants are also allowed in judicial proceedings. They are used in judicial proceedings as well in the USA. Now, what is the possibility of other languages replacing or sharing the status of English in the USA? Considering the number of increasing immigrants in the country, this may not be possible at the moment, but if this number keeps increasing, we have historical accounts of countries where the invaders took over the local population, and the language of the local population was completely displaced, as in many parts of the British Isles. So there is a possibility that, not now of course, but maybe in some 100 years, English in the USA may be replaced by some other language, and this replacement of English by some other language, or the change in the role and status of English in the USA, will have consequence for the global status of English, as USA has played a very important role in empowering English the way it is empowered these days. America being a powerful country, so the language which is owned by the country is also given a lot of power and attention. So keeping all these factors in mind, we cannot say for certainty that English is an invincible language and it is completely safe in terms of its role and status in the world. Any change in the geopolitical status of America can bring about a change in the role and status of English in the world.